Greetings and welcome, everyone. I'm Charles Watkins. I'm the founder of MHSS, but also I'm a clinical psychologist and a licensed psychotherapist. Today, I'd like to talk about how to eliminate bullying, but also how to strengthen intercultural resources. Now, three things are very important when we're talking about these two subjects. Number one is awareness. Extremely important. Everything starts with awareness. Being aware of things, being able to understand them in a better way, gives us the power to change them. And of course, speaking up for people who can't speak up, speaking up for yourself, speaking up when things seem wrong, don't feel right. That's a very important aspect of it as well. Number three, of course, a big one, people who know me know that I like to talk about this a lot, communication. So communication is extremely important for understanding and eliminating bullying, but also for understanding intercultural resources, understanding culture, understanding how the dynamic works within one group, between a bigger group, and between different groups of those groups, okay? So communication patterns are extremely important, and I'm going to take you through that a little bit today. So today I want to start with bullying. As I said, how do we stop bullying? Because eliminating bullying is a big goal, right? That's further down the line. But I think we have to start by understanding, how do we stop it in the first place, right? How do we stop bullying? And I'm sure everyone's aware of bullying and harassment, right? Just want to make sure you understand, it's not about a fight that continues because, you don't like each other. It's really a systematic approach towards humiliating a person and person's dignity again and again and again. Okay, just so we're all on the same page when it comes to the definition of this. And as leaders in the industry, we can stop and we can contain bullying when it starts. We need to understand that bullying can only happen in an environment that is in some way or form okay with it. So there has to be a culture, a belief, and the environment has to be there that allows it to happen. And that's where we can start to stop it. I've received a lot of calls for bullying and harassment, and me and my team, we've helped people deal with these things. It's very prevalent in the industry. It still comes up a lot. And people often don't really know where to start. So how do I address it? Who do I go to? How do I start the process? So it's very important to note that you need to have a plan in place, and you need to understand what you want to do and when you want to do it, okay? Nobody should suffer from bullying. It's a horrible feeling, and nobody should be put in that position. It's a horrible feeling, and it affects you globally. It completely affects the way you think, the way you feel, the way you sleep, the way you eat. So we have to start by doing something, and awareness is one, okay? We're aware of it, but we have to start to speak up. Even for people who can't speak up themselves, many people are afraid. The environment that we work in, that we live in, has to allow for someone to see it and to say, this isn't right. We need to discuss this. We need to sit down and have a talk, because this can't go on the way it is. It sounds simple, but I can assure you, it often doesn't feel simple for the people involved. What we need to do is we need to understand that having the responsibility for our own environment, okay, on board and ashore, needs to be instilled, it needs to be understood, it needs to be communicated openly that this is what is expected, and that this is something that is not in no way or form is this appreciated or is this allowed to happen in this environment, okay? So when you create that culture, you're already instilling the notion and the understanding of people that, okay, I need to speak up when I see this. It's important. People expect this from me. Okay. That has to do with culture. And one of the most important things that I've noticed is you need to feel like you're being supported when you're helping others. You need to have the assurance that you will get help and support and that emotional support, but also people will have your back. They'll make sure and support you when it comes to these things. That's another vital ingredient of how to stop bullying. And last but not least, and this is something I think is very important, setting clear limits from the very start. So when behavior like this happens, what we want to do is want to make sure that we don't allow it to go on for too long. We don't want it to slip by us. We don't want it to say, all right, maybe, you know, having a bad day, but we want to be able to say, this is okay, and this is not okay for me. And we need to be very clear about the consequences. So that's another big thing. A lot of the cases that we've had, it's interesting. As soon as people start with consequences, saying, if you do this again, this will happen, and I'm going to do this. I'm going to report, or I'm going to go to this person. It sets the stage. It sets the tone. It gives the other person an understanding of what you expect from them, but also where your limits are, which is extremely important because a lot of the cases seem to revolve around people not respecting their own limits and allowing this to happen, okay? So what you can do for others is to speak up, but what you can do for yourself is to set these clear limits from the very start and be very clear about what you expect, okay, what you won't allow to happen, and the consequences. If you have these three things in place, it's going to make it a lot easier to establish that culture of care that you want on board and ashore, okay? Unfortunately, it still happens a lot. And I know this is about eliminating bullying, and I wish that would be so easy, but it's not. Let's be very honest. It's not that simple, but we can make the first steps. We can start by stopping bullying in its tracks before it gets too much to bear for that person in question, okay? Before it gets into a problem, before people notice the effects of it, because that's when it's too late. So when you're creating that culture of care and kind of understand the guidelines we just talked about, you also want to make sure to import appreciation for people's work. And because that's another cornerstone people forget. It's not just about stopping bullying, but it's and containing it, but it's also moving on. How do we continue the process of creating a culture that is empathetic and compassionate and understanding? Because once you establish that and that culture is strong, it's not very likely that bullying will be able to start. I mean, of course, you'll have cases, but it's a lot less likely. So appreciation is something I guess we don't learn very often because I mean, at least where I'm from, you kind of are taught to focus on your mistakes. And well, that's at least something that I think a lot of schools focus on. And appreciation for other people's work is not often expressed, or, you know, positive feedback is not often given. Some people are very good at it and some people aren't. But in this culture, when we're creating it, when we're trying to stop bullying, I think one important cornerstone is appreciation of people's work, having that positive feedback saying, this is what you did well, I like the way you handled yourself here in this situation. And it's also a good way to start, because even when it comes to feedback, that's how bullying can start. You know, if there's always constantly negative feedback, and then it turns into, you know, it gets personal, and then it's about the person's dignity, and then it gets humiliating. So it can quickly go that route. But if we understand how important appreciation is, we can kind of start with something positive to create something that is respectable and sensible, but also just human. Being careful with what we say, right? And that kind of gets me into the next section. So I don't want to ramble too much. I know I'm strapped for time here, but let's have a look at intercultural resources. Let's have a look at intercultural things, how to strengthen these things. And that's why I said, I just talked about positive communication, right? Appreciation for people's work. That has to do with communication. And with intercultural resources, it's important to understand that communication is kind of the foundation of all of this. Because with communication comes respect for differences and appreciation, but also acceptance. That's very important. Acceptance of cultural differences. Okay, so we accept them as is instead of not accepting them, and that can happen, you know, passively or actively. And when we're talking about intercultural resources and communication, I just want to make one thing very clear. We're always communicating with individuals, okay? Even though we are all from different places and we have our, you know, story and on our heritage and our traditions and our religion, we're all individuals. And it's important to note that, you know, even if you're from the same country and you grew up in a neighborhood, the person next to you, just one house next to you, can be very different when it comes to resources and strength and traditions. So that's something I want to highlight today is, you know, don't assume because someone is from a certain place or is acting in certain groups that that person is a certain way. You know, be open. We're all individuals. And I think it's important to respect that and to understand that everyone has their own way of doing things, even though, you know, culture can play a huge role. You know, the start should be, this is an individual, and let me get to know him or her in a better way, so I can know what it means to communicate properly with this person, what that person expects, right? Remember, setting limits, right? Understanding what to expect, what do I expect, what don't I expect, you know, that has to do with it. So as you can see, communication runs through a lot of the things that have to do with bullying, with culture, with intercultural resources, with conflict management. It has to do with a lot of things, and it's kind of the foundation of it. And when we're talking about communication, we're often talking about verbal communication, but there's also nonverbal communication, okay? And nonverbal communication can be extremely important depending on how that person is presenting, what it's doing to the person, or maybe what we're sending, we're not realizing it. So again, remember I started with awareness. Be aware of nonverbal patterns, you know, within yourself, but also with others. What are they doing? How are they presenting? What are the nonverbal cues I'm getting? And that brings me to my next point. Allow yourself to be curious. If you don't know, that's okay. Just ask in a respectful way, and simply by simply asking, you can sometimes cancel out big difficulties down the line just by being curious and saying, hey, I'm not sure about this, or what do you mean with that, or is this something that I need to look out for? And if that person doesn't want to answer, that's okay, but you've shown interest. You were genuine and you were curious, and it's good, because that's how we strengthen and grow together even better, by being open and allowing everyone to express their own way of being, right? And that growing together couldn't be more important. So group cohesion. So the most resilient vessels during the pandemic were the vessels that had the highest group cohesion, which means they were working very well together. They were respectful of each other. They were getting together, being social, playing games, talking about the different aspects of their home life, how it is different, how it's the same, playing ping pong and darts together, playing cards, chess, you name it. So there's something to say about growing together, and with that being more resilient than other groups. So the resource here is how we communicate and how we get more information to use to our benefit, because everyone has their own ways of doing things, their own strength, their very own resources. And if we can communicate in a way that allows us access to every individual's resources, we can grow, we can learn, we can adapt, we can assimilate, we can appreciate, and we can even change some of our resources to fit the others that we've learned. So I think at the end of the day, that's what it's all about, really, is learning from each other and then growing together in a stronger way. And I could talk a lot longer about this, but I know we're a bit strapped for time. But if you remember these things that I talked about, and that is awareness, just being aware of things, speaking up, and understanding how communication can be a vital tool for you to gain access to resources that you hadn't had before. And then don't be afraid to ask. Those are kind of my main points today. And the same goes for bullying. So it starts by a culture of care, by creating an environment that won't allow this to happen. And if you have the proper communication tools in place, it's a lot easier for people to speak up because they feel supported and they know they will be supported once they speak up. Okay. I think that's a big one. So yeah, thank you so much for listening to me today. I'm very honored to be here. And yeah, warm welcome and goodbye to everyone out there, wherever you may be.